So today we are going to look at separation of governmental powers. We are going to discuss its meaning, state its merits and demerits. Right? So let's jump into it immediately. The idea of separation of power is simply the division of governmental power across the executive, legislative, and judiciary. The reason why governmental power is divided is to ensure that power does not concentrate in the hands of one governmental institution, so that things like tyranny, dictatorship will not emerge at all. So this political power is shared. Now, this theory was coined by the French political thinker Baron de Montesquieu. So you will see this in past version in OBJ's most often in his book, The Spirit of the Law. Other people that have contributed to this field includes the Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Plato, who have Jim Bodin and the likes. So what are the gains of this system? Right? The right of the individuals, that fundamental human right is secure, it's made safe, because the government is not tyrannical. The government's power is divided into 3 different institutions. There is no concentration of governmental power in one government institution. That's the point here. Now, powers are separated among the organs of government to avoid chaos, to avoid dictatorship, tyranny, oppression. We'll just say that right now. Because power is shared, one institution doesn't have all the powers, so it can't emerge as a dictator, right? It still depends on institution B to survive, and also institution C. It can lead to division and specialization, division of labor. So each organ of government specializes in its own field. What it means is that they can make fantastic decisions, right? It can promote economic stability, it can promote political stability and development as well. Because when experts, when those who have been schooled in their arts take up their job and their business, everything thrives. The executive is focused on implementing laws and policies. The legislature making laws, right? So specialization is very, very important. It's a good gain. So another gain is that the organ of government can check on each other, like what we call checks and balances. We're going to study it next or somewhere down the line. Checks and balances. So no institution can abuse its power because the power is shared and each of them can monitor each other, right? So it ensures rapid progress, economic and political development. So what are the demerits of this system? Number one is that it lowers the quality of decisions made because there are a lot of people to consult. Whether they are experts, we don't know, but a lot. So whenever it starts moving into that, like in Nigeria, for example, we have the we have the Federal Executive Council, comprised of the president, the ministers, commissioners, state governors, everything. And then we have the lawmaking house, we have the bicameral house, the upper house and the lower house. So a lot of people are meant to be involved. So the decision making may be watered down, right? So that's one of the demerits. So it can slow down the smooth running process of the government because a lot of hands are involved. So the decision making process is no longer fast or doesn't meet the desired issues it is meant to like meet. For example, if in time of emergency and the government has to make a serious decision pretty fast, see, the process is slowed down. Such is not achieved, right? So it can even make the government inefficient, right? Now, because you are the only one in charge of doing this, you may not see that desire to get better at it. So you can become inefficient, redundant. This is what you do every time. You get used to it and you lose that desire to improve on it. So the legislature can just decide to like, well, the ones making law, we keep making law. No desire to upgrade, no desire to get better in that process, no desire to improve upon it, right? For example, in Nigeria now, we understand, if you look at our legislature, they're not helping the situation. A lot of loans being taken by the federal government, and who's going to pay for it, right? A lot of wrong policies being made, wrong decisions being made. So it's inefficiency, right? So the next one is checks and balances. Now, each organ can monitor each other. It can result in unhealthy competition. It can bring about political instability. The legislature can decide to frustrate the executive. The executive can decide to mess up with the judiciary, and it can affect everybody. So that's what it says in number 5. It leads to unhealthy competition. So these are the issues we have to look at, right? So let's look at separation of power in the parliamentary and in the presidential system of government. Okay, so in the parliamentary, And let's note that in a parliamentary system, the head of state and the head of government are two separate entities, while in presidential, they are the same one person head of state, that same person head of government. So in parliamentary, the executive is drawn from the legislative and responsible to them, right? Take note of these points. So people don't elect the prime minister. The political parties win. The people elect the political parties. The political parties then pick the prime minister, right? So the cabinet is the center of power, and the prime minister is seen as the first among equals, right? And also the head of government. So in the parliamentary system, the president is the head of state in the parliamentary, but the prime minister is the head of government. So executives are chosen from amongst the parliamentarians, and the president is indirectly elected, right? So in the parliamentary, the idea here is that the organs, power is not basically shared for these reasons here, because the executive is part of the legislature. There is what we call the fusion of the organs of government in parliamentary. So look at what it says here, that the executive is drawn from the legislature and is responsible to them. So power is not totally shared. So one of the bad side there is that dictatorship can emerge, right? Because all powers reside with the parliament, not the people. Remember, the prime minister doesn't owe the people any responsibility or accountability. Rather, he owes the parliament. So they can make laws that suit themselves, and the people can't do anything about, basically, in quotes, right? So in presidential system of government, the head of state is directly appointed by the people, right? And this system is independent of the legislature and the judiciary. So there is no fusion here. It's all separated, right? It's all divided. So checks and balances can happen. Proper separation of power can happen. You get, that's the idea of both presidential and parliamentary. In the parliamentary, the prime minister is part of the legislature. His cabinet is part of the legislature. So there is a fusion of the organs of government. So sharing of power doesn't work properly well in a parliamentary system. But in a presidential, it is the perfect environment for sharing of governmental powers, right? So if you look at it, says this is presidential. The president is directly elected and responsible to the people. And there is a complete separation of power between the executive and the legislature. So I'm going to rest my case here. If you have any questions, meet me in the comment section. We looked at the meaning of separation of power, its merits and demerits. And we saw what it means for the separation of power in a parliamentary system, where there is the fusion of the organs of government, and then in a presidential system where there is the total separation of the organs of government, right? So see you in the comment section if you have any contribution whatsoever.